Ladies and gentlemen, it has recently been released and revealed publicly that the U.S. government has been aware of and harboring aliens and their vehicles for not only the past several decades, but they still do it to this day, which basically proves something that I've been saying for years. This country is in desperate need of immigration reform. I'm starting to suspect that Trump had no intention of ever building that wall because we welcome the aliens and whatever they crash into.
Yeah.
And we're willfully giving them our jobs. Of course, no, I'm not talking about illegal aliens. I'm talking about actual space aliens. We have no fucking choice.
Maybe that's why he made Space Force, was to actually fund a space wall.
You know, I would have so much more respect for him if that level of honesty, if he was just like, what does he have to, at this point, he's been indicted by the actual federal government this time. It's like, okay, just, dude, I might, if you're like, okay, if I win, definitely there's aliens, I'm going to tell you all about it. Space Force is only because of that.
Yep.
Like, the wall was maybe a bit of a distraction. I'm going to come clean with that. Obviously, that's fucking impossible. Like, it would cost like $1 trillion because it would have to go through the private land of all these big Texas ranchers. And even if they agree with me, they're like, oh, yes, we would love a wall. Anyway, that's going to be $5 million a square mile to build this thing because that's what everyone would obviously do. It's like, well, either that or there's a big fucking hole in your wall. What do you want? You know, it's like, it would take like 200 years to build just because of all the paperwork and fucking lawsuits and just everything. It's like everybody knows that that's not going to happen, especially when, you know, anyone that is illegal in this country shows up by, like, 95% show up by airplane and the rest apparently by crashed UFO. Like, you know, it's a worthless thing, but maybe what the wall really is was just sort of a like, oh, we're going to call it that on paper. It's going to be this giant black hole of taxpayer money. And it's actually to deal with, to beef up the real Space Force because this alien thing is the real deal. Like, I crackpot alien lunatic Trump, I would be like, you know what?
I might vote for that.
I
don't want to say that publicly because I'm sure I'd get, like, railed in the comment section, but like if he
good news, because despite the fact that we're broadcasting this thing on the internet, hardly anyone watches it, and we have these cool foil hats that are going to protect them from reading our minds to get at the stuff that we're not even saying out loud.
The problem though is for all the like shit that he talks is like the one thing you can never bank on is him telling the truth.
I know.
And that's not even like trying to take a shot. Like he's just literally one of those.
No, it's
people.
just is what it is.
Yeah.
And that would be a real bummer. It's almost as if maybe it's a little wink. Maybe he's like, yeah, I know that you know that I'm never going to tell the truth and I'm just going to do whatever.
He did.
So the fact, but he knows that we know that's a lie. Yeah. So like the thing is he's like, and you'll notice that I never said there was aliens because if I said that, it might be a lie. But I didn't say anything, did I? Which leaves the alien thing on the table, Trump-wise.
Well, he did the whole, let me tell you, if you knew what I knew about aliens, you wouldn't believe it, okay? You wouldn't believe it. That's all I can say.
I love the way that one thing I do respect about that guy, and the list is short, but his ability to say so much nothing using as many words as possible. It's literally the opposite.
Oh, he's so good at it.
The truth of the matter is brevity is the soul of wit.
Yeah.
But the other truth of the matter is every rule has an exception. So just like just blowing as much hot air to go nowhere for that long goes full circle around to being funny again. Like it's just perfect.
I forget the author, but there was somebody wrote a book about how like the psychology of how he does that, of like where it's not just like if he Nancy Pelosi, the horrible Democrats, to just the Negative Nancy, I call her. She's just really horrible, nasty woman. She really is. She's just so bad for our country. She really is. She's terrible. Just awful. And it's like, but there's a psychology they're explaining that like in the span of that 10 seconds that I just did that, I just called Nancy Pelosi negative, horrible, awful, terrible, bad for our country. It's like But he does the same thing in the other direction too. You know, I have a lot of properties that just, you know, you've seen them right down the beautiful properties. Just people.
Yeah.
Some people say they're the best properties. Like,
No,
people are saying that. But
some of what he does is like
there's a psychology behind
textbook.
it. Yes.
Like, listen, I was talking at work today, you know, like, and I might have mentioned this about one of our coworkers that's more in line with what you do, and he might be right next to you. When I say occasionally I'll hear something and I can smell the propaganda on your breath, like where I'm like, I know this came from not your own thoughts, and it bums me out a little bit, but like,
I'm guilty of that too.
We all are.
Yeah.
The thing that we were talking about was literally like the ability to go, okay, you got me, is the thing that no matter how smart you are, until you're okay with being wrong, they're always going to have you by the balls. Yeah. Like until you can go, oh, yep, I was buying that and I really shouldn't have. Sorry, that's on me. My bad. Like the Ray Stantz and Ghostbusters when they knock the table over. It's like, that's on me. That's on the like... You know, but that gives you the ability to actually do this thing that, like, basically no one, particularly in this country, is capable of doing, and just going like, oh, no, rather than doubling down, be like, oops, oopsie daisy, yep, I was wrong. It's like, that gives you like a superpower almost. So you can be like, okay, so now that I've a few times been like, that's how they got me, and you like can admit to it, and you can kind of like wallow in it a little bit and not shut it out of your head and clench your eyes and whatever. Right. You can kind of be like, oh, so now I see what they're doing. Now I see exactly how it is that the mechanism of getting everyone, because, you know, as I've even mentioned, I think on this podcast before, and probably you and I on the tour bus and whatever, is that like, you know, propaganda works, and it's like this finely polished machine, because you think about if they came right out and were like, here is why we ever go to war, and here is why the military exists. We're just going to be like right on the table about that. It's like, how many people would sign up to be like, well, you see, we have some Saudi investors that want a trade route open and like whatever. It's like, will you be willing to step on a landmine and lose your leg for that or whatever? And like, you know, it's like, how many would be like, oh yeah, cool, right here.
Yeah.
It would never happen. Like, and the only way it would is if it just paid like an exorbitant amount of money. Like if there was like a gain sharing program. You know what I mean? Like you got to like drive like a gold tank, and you just wore like a turtleneck with a suit, and you were just like in the he's like, hey, we got to open this trade route here. Like you're just like a fucking crooked New York construction teamster. You're like, yeah, no, we don't. Yeah, the CIA, you know, this guy with a yacht wants this poppy farm here in this country that we've decided to fuck over. Yep. You'd get some real maniacs, but generally speaking, it just wouldn't work. So, you know, the whole like, you know, do your best at work and maybe your boss will give you another 50 cents an hour, you know, the whole thing. So it has to work, and it can only really work one way, and it's been perfected forever. Like I would love, like if I ever went back to school, it would be like a college professor that just teaches like a advertising and propaganda. They're the same thing, but just a master class on how that worked. I could listen to myself talk at that for the rest of my life until I was an old 80-year-old professor man just screaming about, well, these people just don't care. But like, that stated, you know, I will say that it's like Trump figured some of that out and just kind of has the lack of tact and filter and self whatever to just be like, I'm just going to like use these things. Like everything he does when he's talking like that, like that's not like a weird coincidence. He knows he's doing that too.
Yeah, he's very aware.
It doesn't mean that he's like this amazing genius. It just means that like he read like one book about it and was like, I'm just going to do this from now on. And with all the money and attention he already had, it's just like, wow, this really works.
The book had all the best words.
Yeah, the best word. Yeah, you say nothing, but well, and not to like, you know, it's a little bit of a trope. Actually, comparing him to Hitler is just mean to Hitler at this point. But I mean, you know, it's like, but like there are things. If you read some of the translated speeches that guy would do into English, I mean, like the language was like a little different because of the time or whatever. But it would be like a lot of the like, and you, of course, all you people are all smart enough to know exactly who I'm talking about when I say this, and you know, it's like the same thing where it's like I'm calling you smart. I'm not saying it out loud, so you can just use your imagination like a good movie monster, like the original Alien, where you barely ever saw this thing and it was like really scary. Like, the human imagination is always going to be its own loudest proponent, where it's like, oh, he must mean Mexicans, but without ever really saying it, because then someone can be like, well, I am Mexican. Why am I voting for you?
Yeah.
And like all this stuff. So it's like, you could even...
He's mastered the dog whistle.
Yeah, and it's like, that's no small feat. Like, yes, it's like a hard and fast mechanism. It's like, fixing a car engine, you can learn it.
Yep.
But it's like the one thing that he learned how to do. Yeah. And I'm like, God damn, it just like keeps working. But it's always worked. It's always like my, I will admit, even in my like day-to-day interactions, I tend to kind of, like, I'm not up to as much or whatever, and it's not, but I tend to just kind of like, oh, I know where to like, here's where I don't say it and let them use their imagination. It's like a subtle thing to kind of get whatever I want out of life as much as possible. I'm sure my white male privilege is at play in all those situations as well. But I think, you can't sell it. You can't get rid of it. So it's like not using it is a waste. There are starving children in other countries with no white male privilege. And to just flush that down the toilet would be rude to them, frankly. Yeah. While they mine the everything that I'm going to need for the Tesla, I'm going to blow a bunch of money on eventually. Yeah. I don't want that to be in vain.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Yeah.
So anyway, they by the way, real quick, I do want to say that Chris was kind enough, because he knows that I'm a raging alcoholic, to bring over a bottle of Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit single barrel. It has like real writing like filled in, and the reason that I mean, it was a lovely gift, and it's delicious and it's very strong, and I've already been drinking a lot of it. You might notice that we're again, I thought we would take the foil hats off within the first 2 minutes, and I think they're staying on, because
I did like earlier you said it was tasty, but the type of tasty that you knew that you were very self-aware that you're getting drunk.
Look, Donald Trump might dance around the truth a little bit, but Wild Turkey 101 does not.
No.
It lets you know exactly why it's in your mouth, and it's like, it's good and it's smooth in a way for 101 bourbon. It is surprisingly smooth. It is delicious, but it's like, if you're not already a person who's like, at least, like, I'm too young to be drinking this. At 42 years old, this is like giving a baby a Jell-O shot. Like, it's just, you're like, this is the drink of 60-year-old men that have done some things that have put them in a very large summer home, but that still haunts them at night. Yeah. Like, that is what this is for. And I can taste that in every sip, which I do do really love.
Well, but I was telling John, Wild Turkey was a favorite of President Truman, who signed the majestic documents just a couple of months after the Roswell incident. And I guess his favorite was Wild Turkey in the morning with his sausage and eggs. So...
And that, I mean...
To your point, most people even back then at least waited till brunch. And he was just like,
thing.
no, we're president of the fucking United States. The Wild Turkey starts.
If you think about it, in the 1940s, we've all seen Mad Men, but in the 1940s, and you're in charge of America during World War II, the fact that you don't just, like, go to sleep at night in a bathtub full of liquid opium is saying that you have actually shown a lot of restraint.
Yeah.
Like, all you've done is maybe go toe-to-toe with Winston Churchill, who would certainly, I'm sure those two would, and I don't know enough about history to know. Did they ever meet? I mean, they were in the middle of the thing together.
I think so.
And I think they would both be, well, we're going to, of course, have a brandy in the morning. It's like, oh, I'm more of a Wild Turkey man. And that's how we reach across the pond and found some common ground. It's like, you don't wear top hats. It's like, no, but we drink the brown stuff, and that was enough for the Allies to get together.
You figure with Truman, too, I mean, just between post-World War II and then Roswell, like, to be honest, to deal with what he dealt with and only become an alcoholic who drinks at breakfast is, like, that strikes me as that he was, like, actually could have turned out a lot worse.
Yeah, look, again, I mean? in the historical context, that is a man who has a firm grip on where his life is going. Yes. And like, I always I mentioned it earlier, but there's an episode of Futurama where he's depicted, they go back in time to the 40s, to like the they're around the first nuclear tests or whatever, and a bunch of funny stuff happens. I love that show, but there's a scene where they bring, because it's like the Futurama crew time traveling and showing up, trips the radar of the government or whatever. So it's like Truman comes on Air Force One and they just wheel out this man-sized crate that just says canned eggs on the side, which is, obviously like a very 1940s thing. And then like he just punches and kicks his way out of the bike. Like, what's happening here? He just like puts his like fedora on with his like white suit. And like the way they depict him is like, I mean, probably not even really that far off from reality. Like, the kind of guy that was just, made the order to be like, we've essentially beat Japan, but they won't stop fucking running their mouth. So we're going to drop a futuristic super weapon on like 2 of their civilian cities and lie to them and be like, after the second one, they're, because we only had the 2 nukes at the time. They weren't easy to make or anything. No. And we were just like, they were like, oh, baby, we can, oh, God. We can do, it's still recording. We can do this all day if you guys want. There we go. And that takes some brass balls, really, to just kind of be like, we're just going to keep nuking every one of your major cities until there's no more Japan. Yeah. And that, honestly, though, that was, it was in their culture to, like, never back down, never surrender. And, like, they were like, yeah, but, like, I think our ancestors will give us the thumbs up for being like, okay, but there won't be any more Japanese people ever again. So we're going to go ahead and take the L on this one. Yeah. And that was the game. And that's a deranged, weird part of history that people kind of forget. It's just like, you ever wonder why a lone B-2 bomber could just kind of sail over the middle of that country we're at war with, like, unmolested by other airplanes or artillery. It was gone. Like, our guys were just getting demoralized because they were sending women and children with, like, rocks and sticks to come. And of course, you have to shoot them. You can't let them, hit you with a rock. Like, and they were just like, this sucks. Like, when is this ever going to stop? Yeah. And they're like, oh, we're going to drop, the weapon that draws the ire of alien civilizations on these guys. Yeah. And, I've always said that as an American I'm not proud of anything, but I would at least have sort of preferred that, we dropped it on Germany, and it was because that animated propaganda film from The Rocketeer where they showed like Nazi rocket men like taking over America, and it like almost happened, but then we like got him at the last, we hit Berlin with a nuke at the last second. It's like, yeah, like that would be less kind of like bittersweet than nuking Japan after we'd roundly beated them, but their corpse just wouldn't stop twitching, and so you just have to sit there strangling it. So it's like, that, that's actually kind of weird that and I guess par for the course for the human race, that the one time we've actually used so far this apocalyptic supervillain weapon on someone else was after we already beat them, and they were just like, it's like beating up someone in a bar fight and then going to leave, and they like threw a bloody cough. There's like, fucking bitch. You're like, oh, what was that? And then you just come over and just start pistol whipping them, and it's like, hey, that doesn't look good. Whatever. Like, but
this was done before you kicked him in the face 6 more times. Well,
yeah. And so, like, but the fun thing, not only to kind of preface the wonderful and irresponsible level of booze that Chris has brought me for this podcast, also the fact that with all of this sort of like, I don't know, like I love this sort of alien whistleblower type thing that's happening right now, because I've just always been such a fan. Like, I love Bob Lazar, and I love, even when I know it's stupid, the thing, it's like, I don't want, like, I have had enough, like Joe Rogan, being like, probably like, you can't have a trans UFC guy. I'm like, yeah, I think everyone mostly agrees with you, whatever. Yeah. Like, and I don't give a shit anymore. Stop having Ben Shapiro on your show and pretending that was a reasonable conversation just because you want to seem like you're so cool and even with everybody. That guy is a fucking wet turd. But like, whenever he talks about like Graham Hancock, yeah, like Graham Hancock about there was an ancient civilization further back in time than we realized, or like Bigfoot was an Australopithecus, or like there is Bob Lazar's on the show talking about
my brain around that stuff.
Well, I love that stuff. Yeah. Like I want to, even when it's stupid, I love hearing about it. But the other thing is that I 100% believe most of it. Like despite what? Like I don't really know. Like our grip on history is just terrible. So it's like there's so many things that could have happened.
Yeah. I did think it was interesting today, or it was either today or yesterday, but they asked one of those senators, it might have been Lindsey Graham or one of them, but and he said that I just don't believe that this stuff would, I don't think that we would recovered craft and people could keep that a secret. And I used to actually agree with that line of thinking, and now more and more I'm like, there is something to be said about people's ego of just gatekeeping knowledge that just makes them feel good. And also,
well, and everything we've been hearing, and this makes a lot of sense to me, is that like you really can't keep secrets, but obfuscation and noise floor are like the real name of the game. Where it's like, if you think about, we were talking about this at work, the way that like they kind of people would drag Bob Lazar and be like, oh yeah, like maybe he went to, where was it, the thing they were saying that he didn't do.
Oh, it was a bunch of stuff. It was, I could go down the
list.
Or
the university or the Los Alamos.
Yeah, Los Alamos, yeah.
And they were like, the same people that are like, well, he might have worked there, but it was probably as a janitor. But it's on a matter, he's like on the front page of the local paper because he put a jet engine in like a Honda and it like worked. And like all of this shit. And then they also made some weird attempts to scrub his name from it that are kind of like public record. And those people still stick to like, yeah, but he was just the janitor. I'm like, okay, none of that makes it. You just at least pick a lie. But the thing is the job they've done.
Yeah, a fucking janitor literally works at one of the most high-profile government agencies, and somehow, like, he's putting hydrogen engines in his fucking car. Yeah, he just sweeps up the floor here at this high-tech government
facility. And also,
like,
for no reason, because aliens aren't real, they tried to make it look like he never worked there. Yeah. It's like, well, okay, why would that be? And so, like, but that's just the trick. Like, you can't really hide things, so you just have to kind of, like, saturate everything with, like, it's all stupid, and who cares, and this is just for, like, dumbasses. And, like, it's almost, in light of everything now, it's almost more obvious what was happening in the past. And we could be wrong and just, oh, this is hogwash. But I think that it's not. And it was just like, well, it's going to get out. So let's just make everyone that's into this kind of thing seem like an absolute lunatic. And that way, like, even if someone comes to you with the truth, they're going to be like, well, no, because everyone like that is a kook. And I'm going to sit here on Reddit debunking everything I hear. And blah, blah, blah. That's my whole personality.
Okay, so conspiracy question for you then.
Yes.
Because... oh god, it might be David Icke or one of those kind of fringe guys like that. I don't know, but he claimed that part of disclosure would happen because of, like I'm not saying this is an absurd, but like, okay, we're about to arrest all these government people for pedophilia, so then they're going to use the alien thing to distract from that. I don't think that's the case. But if aliens or this type of disclosure is happening, do you think it's happening because it's just time for disclosure, or do you think that it is to try and hide what the other left hand is going
to come out no matter what? So we kind of have to like, well, look how much we kind of don't. Even you and me, we should be. I'm excited about this, but am I? Like, we're not that excited. We're like, oh, I guess we might finally find out about this whole alien thing. Like, if we had found out about this and like back when Rogan was still on Fear Factor, we'd be shitting our pants. Like, oh my god, that guy just came out and was like, oh yeah, he's a guy that really worked for the government, and like it's on real news channels and things. And by the way, so there's been a lot of fun stuff. There's been a lot of like. There was like this big leak thing on Reddit that may or may not have been real, where a guy was talking about like underwater facilities. But his thing, it held a lot of. It was pretty airtight, where it like explained like why would they act like this if they were so advanced, blah blah blah. And it's like it was so logical that either it was like a Tolkien level universe building fiction or it really happened. And honestly, either way, I'm pretty good with it. I'm like, if this is just a random person's airtight universe build of like how this works and which also lines up with a bunch of other stuff, including the whistleblower guy that hadn't come out yet, and then he did, and then it kind of, whatever. Yeah. Like, but that's the big thing is like it's in the center of all this other stuff, and so the whistleblower. If you don't know what that is, it's I should do my due diligence here. If you're watching this and you don't know what we're talking about at all, there's this guy that was like, he's like a highly credentialed government guy, just kind of like came out and was just like, yeah, we recovered crashed UFOs like in Roswell and moving forward and just whatever. Yeah. And like it's been on the real news, which is rare for that to happen. I mean, it ended up being on my favorite news outlet, which is One India News. It's one of my most prestigious and accurate news things. And we're going to take a quick look at it. It's a very short video, but I just want everyone to be up to speed with where we are. And let's see here. We have the interact button. Allows me to just hit play. Yeah, there we go. So that's real footage.
A former United States intelligence official turned whistleblower has revealed an array of classified information to US Congress and the Intelligence Community Inspector General. These revelations pertain to US government.
One India doesn't normally talk about American affairs. So this is big. There you go. More actual footage.
Marking an unprecedented disclosure that has until now remained shrouded in secrecy. A former intelligence and military official, David Grusch, has said that the United States secret government program has recovered non-human spacecraft. He has also claimed that he has turned evidences that the UFO recovery program exists over to the Inspector General of the US.
I like they use like the PlayStation loading screen there.
The US has been urged to disclose evidence of UFOs after David Grusch said that the government has possession of intact and partially intact alien vehicles. David Charles Grusch, who happens to be a decorated former combat officer who had fought in Afghanistan and has previously worked for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and the National Reconnaissance Office, has come forward as a whistleblower. He alleges that this vital information has been illegally withheld from the Congress. He has also filed a complaint stating that he is facing illegal retaliation for his confidential disclosures. He left the government in April after a 14-year career in US intelligence. The disclosures come after a swell of credible sightings and reports have revived the
That's from fucking the Phantom Menace. One India News.
Bravo.
Is the old, yeah, I mean, honestly, like,
oh man.
It's just, we already saw this,
like earlier behind him, they're like trying to like decipher whether or not this government whistleblower is crazy or not, and they're just showing like DMT images.
Out of all the news sources I found, this is absolutely the only one I trust. Like they want you to know what they think of what's happening. Then again, the David Fravor stuff there.
Yeah.
Like a lot of
One India channel and never miss an update.
Oh, I'm already subscribed. But yeah, so that's what if you haven't seen, and it's like, smaller, less credible news sources than oneindia.com, like Fox News and whatever. They have mentioned this stuff too, which is, like they don't normally get into like stuff that actually happened, but in this case, I feel like it's kind of like a big thing.
Fox doesn't care unless fucking Hunter Biden was doing space coke with the aliens.
And that, at this point, maybe he was. And at this point, again, voter base wise, like we talked about last time on this podcast, like that doesn't make me not like him. Like Hunter Biden was doing space coke off of an alien's butthole. And I'm like, well, then should we elect him president? Like I'm kind of into this.
Yeah.
And that actually, I wanted, this is a good time. Also, probably a half hour in is a good time for you to spark up that joint.
Oh, yeah.
But like, the thing that you had mentioned, that I think it was someone on Joe Rogan or whatever, but like someone had kind of postulated that, or was Bob Lazar?
Yeah, it was Bob Lazar.
It was the guy who was like one of the more interesting pieces of this. But like they were talking about, well, they must be so much more advanced than us, and he was kind of like, well, I don't know. Like if this element that we can barely recreate one atom of or whatever, if it was like abundant on their planet, it's the thing. It's their coal. It's like their steam engine. It's like, oh, they figured this thing out, but it could like propel you through. You could control gravity and time with it. So it's like they might have gotten to that before anything else or whatever. And so it's just like you can travel like across the galaxy and you can do all this crazy shit.
Yep.
Even though you're not actually like a million years past us or whatever.
No.
Which leads itself to something that I love, which is the concept of like the human race. Look, as an individual, I obviously crave validation. This podcast is a stand-in for how I used to be in rock bands and now my back hurts, but I need something to get people to pay attention to me. Yeah. And I get that. But you know what else I need? I'm not a nationalist. I'm not someone that cares about like other people that look like me or what patch of dirt anyone grew up on or even what your zodiac sign is. I don't care what side of whatever you're on. I just don't care about it. But you know what I would love? A little bit of vindication for the entire human race. Every last one of us all at once, which would be alien civilizations. Basically, this element 115, the thing you could make like a gravity time traveling fucking crazy space engine with or whatever. They were lucky enough to have that be plentiful or at least findable on their planet, making them basically like, like a trust fund race or something where it's like, oh, well, of course you can fly across the planet.
Damn, what if the aliens are Nepo babies?
I think so. Because like, and
they're just like Hollywood child stars that fucking lucky.
The people of Earth are the punk rock band that shouldn't have gotten famous, but just did so much cool and wild shit on the internet when it was first happening on MySpace. The SMB of the universe, if you will, where it was like, we should never have gotten to where our CDs shouldn't have been a hot topic. We should have been direct support for MSI at the height of their popularity without paying for it. No, that doesn't happen. That's a terrible example for other people because you shouldn't expect that because it doesn't work like that. And it's like, but that's the human race. Like aliens look at us and it's like, okay, they don't have this thing on their planet, and yet they just light explosive shit on fire, and they've like flung themselves out of their own atmosphere to the moon. They've like launched probes that have like gone out past their own solar system, and it's like it has like a record player on it. Like they don't even know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They invented nuclear weapons, which, oh my god, like we actually didn't. We discovered element 115 and started traveling around the cosmos, and we kind of got our shit together. Like there's one planet in the entire universe that we've mapped out, that we've found, and it's like they caught our attention because they invented nuclear bombs and we didn't. We're like, whoa! You found like a magic rock that you could make a chain reaction with that could like vaporize an entire continent. And so like we need to come and like kind of actually no, I like that. I like where it's like, oh, they went through their nuclear age and then like, they got past it. It's like, what if it's just like, we're it? Yeah. And like elephant, like either you're in like an ape race that just is still eating bananas and throwing rocks.
Yep.
Or you're born on a planet with element 115 and you have like a gravity engine that can like propel you to the other side of the universe with no inertia or breaking your neck, nothing in an instant, whatever. And there's one juvenile delinquent planet that's like we figured out that if you just blow things up in the right order, you can make an internal combustion engine that drives a car. And they're like, what? And it's like, oh, you can do that not just with flammable liquids and things, but you could split the atom, that stuff that element 115 is made out of, that you found it laying on the ground and you made all this stuff with it. Yep. You could split that in half and you could use it to blow up the moon. Like, check it out. Like, we got in a little bit of a tiff with people on the other side of our planet, and we fucked them over with this thing. Yeah. And then we also use it to make power plants And we don't even harness its power. We just use it because it gets hot, which makes steam, which turns a turbine, which means nuclear power plants are just locomotives. It's like, I love the fact that if the aliens came here, we'd be a bad influence on them.
Yes. I think that's... I want nothing more than to believe that so hard. You know, like, just like, to your point, if they maybe... technologically maybe very advanced, but maybe socially, culturally, they're very one-dimensional, and, you know, they come down here.
Yeah.
You know, they do a little coke.
Yeah.
You know, something. It's like, you know, are they the type where they're like, hey, this is bad, this is not a good path, don't go down this path? Or are they the type of thing like, hey, you know, if we do a couple of things to this, we can make this into, like, space coke.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden... you went from doing coke to doing space coke, and
yeah,
I don't know what space coke is, but
because
seems like space anything is better than the actual regular thing. You know what I mean?
I think so. Like you know, it's like as humans, we're like, oh, let's lace our cocaine with fentanyl, and it'll it'll make it a million times stronger. It's like a bad idea, but it's like, well, it's like, hey, now that you guys are here, let's lace our coke with element 115 and just do like fucking time travel anti-gravity cocaine and whatever.
Yeah.
Like, we are the Hunter Biden of the cosmos collectively as a race, and Again, 100% behind that. Like, that's... like, the idea that we could corrupt other spacefaring Type 2 civilizations... and wouldn't that just be perfect, too? Because, like, that's always been, my job, maybe yours, like, where we're kind of, like, grew up... it is what it is, you kind of gotta bend the rules a little bit to hold your own. You kind of have that married with children upbringing, like...
yeah.
Like, you didn't have much handed to you... but you had some friends that did, and you're there to make sure that the train wreck that will ultimately be their lives, you're on board for.
Yes.
And, you can guide a little bit. And it's like, if we could, oh my God. Like, if we could be the delinquent planet that sells the intergalactic high school weed for the first time, like a John Cusack movie, like, that is just wonderful.
Yep.
And probably the best that we could hope for, I would really imagine.
Yeah.
God, there's so much we were talking about at work,
I was just
too.
thinking about with all this shit that it's like, it's so crazy. Like, obviously we're being silly right now, but to have a conversation about this shit that doesn't just immediately devolve into like a fucking like Alex Jones style rant about like George Soros and like reptilians and just all the and it's like, now it's like, this isn't nonsense now.
Well, the other funny thing is like, this is like and I'm not that old hat at the, I kind of just out of boredom in 2020 started the YouTube channel podcasting for something to do and just kind of hung on to it. But like, really, after being like, a fan of like Ancient Aliens and everything on cable since like 2002 and whatever, like, we've never really gotten into this subject this deeply on a podcast because typically, like, I'm not that interested in talking about things that absolutely aren't. You know what I mean? Like, even if I'm sort of into it, I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Like, the timing of this coming out tomorrow or later tonight or whenever I upload it, like it could be that maybe we just get lucky and this just is eventually in the Library of Congress where it's like, well, these idiots actually were like having sort of a frank discussion about every angle of this, and it came out like one day before it all happened or whatever. It's like, oh, we all were like, look, fine. There's aliens, there's things. Right. Oh my God, though. That's what I do want to talk about with like the like a little over 20 minutes we have left. And I'm still going to read a page from Dear Asshole. Which I should, just to preface that, last episode, Meredith and I went back and we're talking about how like you and I were like, is this just AI? Is this not a real thing? But the revelation was I finally like looked enough. It wasn't on the back. It was on like the second to last page. There was like a bunch of credits or something, and they were like, but I found out that book came out in 2011. So that wasn't true. Also, it came out in 2011, and it's a worthless piece of rotten garbage, and I hate it, and it's still for sale to this day. And so, I mean, this is just a mystery Like, does the government have crashed UFOs? Big deal. The origins of Dear Asshole, though, are like a wider circle of like, what is, But anyway, we'll get to that. But the thing that, I'm going to wear this for the rest of the episode.
Yeah, we got to get the oversight committee on that one.
Yeah,
about the Dear Asshole.
The thing that I really want to talk about a little, at least on this alien tip, is like a little before this whistleblower guy. And that's why it's so fucking interesting, because it's like Bob Lazar's been around forever.
Yep.
And I've always been like, bro, like, not okay, like, there's people that come out of the woodwork and they're like, oh, he's not a realer. Like, predicting element 115. It's like, well, I predict element 117 will eventually be synthesized. It's like, oh, look at that, we eventually got to it. And it's like, it's kind of specious, though. But then there's some of the stuff that he was talking about, you mentioned earlier, that, he couldn't quite describe how the craft was made back in, like, the 90s when he's talking about it. It's like, it looked like it was melted or it was, like, all one piece. But now he's like, oh, it looks like it was 3D printed. Like, we've caught up.
Yep.
So we were able to kind of be like, oh, we can kind of describe what we're seeing a little bit more. And I wouldn't, again, if everything in a more advanced technological situation was basically like the end result of 3D printing to its logical conclusion, where it's like an atom at a time just gets put together. So of course there's no seams or screws or
Yep.
And that's weird. But maybe he got lucky. But then there was like a few things where he talked about the biometric scanners that they had at these things that no one knew about. No one.
Yep.
They measured like the bones in your hand and stuff. And I think people kind of like brush past that a little bit. But I'm like, that's no joke. Literally nobody knew that was a thing anywhere ever unless they actually worked at one of those places. So he had to have at least... Does that mean there's aliens? I don't know. But like he had to at least been there. Like that's a thing where it's like, okay, guys, like that recently came out that was a thing. Nobody knew.
Yep.
And it was very advanced at the time and all that stuff. And like, so it's like, okay. So, always have I been like a fan of him or whatever. So, but anyway, there's like between all of his stuff and then this guy that's kind of been like, oh, I'm the most credible whatever person to ever come out with all this stuff. And it kind of even like, there's a few things that like line up with some of the stuff that he said. And people are like, yep, I mean, he's a guy. Like, it's like a big deal. But a little bit before the whistleblower, and the timing is kind of wild. There was, I think it was originally on 4chan or something, but it was this Reddit thing. And there was this guy that was like, and there was a lot of people dragging him, and there was all this stuff, but it's like he was telling a very, very, very watertight story about how he was like, look, I worked at one of these places, and I have like stage 4 lymphatic, like what I'm about to check out. And he's like, check this out. I also have I with my family, I don't know if it's going to happen, but I have a dead man switch. So like all the rest of it will come out when I'm gone. But like he was just like, ask me anything. I'll put it all out there. And it's been puzzled over. And I read it while I was on vacation, like, going to bed at night and stuff. And he talked about how the whole thing with the recovered craft thing. And again, it was very similar to what this current dude was yelling about.
Yep.
But he's like, they're here. We don't know for how long because it's very compartmentalized the way Bob Lazar talked about, and not even just Bob Lazar, all high level, the Robert Oppenheimer, like the nuclear thing. It's like you were very much like you only knew what you needed to know in your department to make this happen or whatever. Yep. It's a common practice. It's not even that fantastical. But he's like, but here's what I know per where I worked. And it's like, there might have been more of these facilities. We don't know whether they've been here for 100 years or before humans evolved or whatever. There's kind of no way to know. But there is a thing underwater. It's this giant mobile base or craft or factory, like whatever you want to call it. It can move. It vaguely stays where the Bermuda Triangle is. There's been a few times when we've tried to actively aggress towards it. It's like we like sent submarines and things after it. And he was like, they got vaporized is leaving too much. There was no vapor. Like they just the things that were like, whenever they detected like, okay, they're coming here and they mean business. Like they shot them with a, you never even existed before Ray. Like they got shot with a thing where their parents were like, we never had kids. Like it was like a whoa. And so like,
oh, I bet our government wanted that.
Oh, yeah. And Yeah, and his whole thing, there's all these different things where it's just like, it's why, like, there was so many things coming in and out of the water. He was like, as far as we know, some craft would show up off-world and leave off-world from space, but rarely, as far as we can at least tell.
Yeah.
Most things came out of this thing. And they were, like, made to order. Whenever they would, like, build a ship, it'd be like, well, this is mostly has the sensors on it for this one mission, so it's like shaped a little differently. It's like whatever, like it was like the bare minimum for whatever it had to do. It was a very computer intelligence type of like, this is only for this, like a Skynet thought. We don't care. It's going to go out there and it's going to do whatever it's going to do. And like, you know, the gravity in our planet, everything like that, like occasionally there'd be wrecks, and they would just leave it because they're like, you guys can't. Go ahead. You know we're here anyway. And yeah, fine. Pick the pieces up and try to rebuild it. Like, you don't have element 115. You don't know how to synthesize any of this other shit.
Yeah.
It's like, you can fuck around with it all you want. And it means nothing to us. Even if you recreated some of our weapons and came at us, we're still just, we know how it actually works. We're just going to fucking erase you from history. It's the, you know, like, so it's like, we don't give a shit. And it, to me, like, it just, like even if it, again, it was a guy making stuff up, like, even fictionally, it answered, though, thought questions. Like, well, why do they like it? And they're like, well, we kind of think that the things that we're dealing with are actually biological drones made by a more advanced thing, and that they're very single-minded. It's like, well, how come they don't? And it's like, well, because it doesn't matter. Well, why do they just let this happen? It's like, well, because it doesn't make a difference to them. It's very machine logic.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that makes like a shitload of weird sense. And then the other thing is, the fact of the matter, like, you know, even saying that it's like, well, it's under the Bermuda Triangle. It's like, well, is that a little on the nose? I'm like, well, okay, but the amount of on-record stuff where, like, pilots are like, my fucking, like, compass is just spinning in circles and, like, all this shit. It's like, that's well documented.
Yes.
And we were like, okay, well, why is that? And no one, they're like Chief Wiggum. They're like, wow, like, no one has an answer.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, yeah, there's a giant factory that builds things that bend gravity in order to move and do their business or whatever, like, down here. And it's like, well, that's maybe exactly what would cause that. Like, because otherwise we don't actually even know.
Yeah.
I would love, or not love, I guess I wouldn't want that because, like, I kind of like believing in an alien spacecraft factory underwater on Earth or whatever, you know, and explain James Cameron's Abyss. Is he that creative? I don't think so. That clearly was a government leak or whatever. But like the weird true things that I haven't heard anything better about are my favorite part, where it's like, well, okay, why is the Bermuda Triangle like that? No one. We just ignore it. We're like, well, that's some fucking History Channel garbage. Who cares? I'm like, yeah, but like all that stuff did happen. All those crashes and lost boats and bizarre shit. And they're like, okay, well, cool. Why is that? And they're like, well, it was maybe like, there's no real precedent for it anywhere else on Earth, but it could be, there's a large deposit. We don't know. And it's like, okay, if you had a better answer, I'd love to hear it. And that's the thing. Like, you're like, okay, but like, so we're like, well, okay, what if this is going on? It's like, well, that would make sense. But of course, aliens are silly, so no. Okay, well, then it's 2023. Then what is it? Well, eventually we'll figure it out, and I'm sure the answer will be something boring. And like, okay, is that how we live our life? We're just excited. And by the way, I will use this time to bring up, I'm a man of science. And I think people that like ignore scientists or actively are like, well, they just have whatever, you know, are full of shit and self-absorbed and whatever. But like, I will say that there are people in the scientific community that seem to be at high levels, and again, not that I know or whatever, it's mostly from listening to podcasts with like other people that have done Joe Rogan's podcast, and I listen to their podcast, like fucking what's his name, that Russian guy that's like a fucking UFC wrestler that's like an AI scientist or whatever. I really like him. And I can't remember his name right now. Lex Friedman. Yeah. Like guys like him. So it's like, I don't fucking know. Yeah. I'm just regurgitating crap Lex Friedman says, but I like the cut of his jib.
Yep.
And he did a great interview with Tim Dillon, which I imagine is a lot of fun.
Yes.
But like when you know, I'm for science, but when you ask certain people, like, okay, well, will we ever be able to prove that there's like a soul, maybe, or like that there's something transcendent beyond the material world? And, you know, keeping in mind that we know that like quantum physics is totally a thing, and that time and space are like an illusion, and there's like some sort of objective proof that that's kind of true, like the holographic universe thing and whatever. And it's like the idea that a lot of them tend to kind of spout this idea is like, well, I'm sure once we eventually figure it out, despite the fact that we have no idea right now, but I'm sure when we do figure it out, the answer will be very boring and very dry, and it'll just be there is of course no aliens and no soul and whatever, and the status quo will be upheld, and that's how science works. I'm like, wait a second, I don't know. Science to me should be an open-ended thing. Science to me, Chris, here is what science means to me. It means that you can go back and read the Bible and go, maybe the Tower of Babel story was actually proof that we're in the Matrix. Okay? What science means to me is that when Star Wars said in a galaxy, you know, in a long time ago in a galaxy very far away, they literally meant that. Not like they're talking about the future of our galaxy, but it's a storyteller. They mean in 1977, in a galaxy a long time ago and far away from that, there was like Star Wars things happening. And to go, we for sure know that that's not true because it sounds silly is bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, science should be... I miss the 1940s of science when we were... I'm very excited to go see the Oppenheimer movie. I really wish the people that made Chernobyl would make a movie about Operation Paperclip. Like, I just want to see...
I'd watch that.
Like a Back to the Future, Rick and Morty, crazy, like, outer space, 1940s, Nazi scientist, moon time travel, psycho adventure. Just be like, hey, everybody, guess what? All of that shit happened. Like, Operation Paperclip was because after we nuked Japan, the aliens came and were like, you invented nuclear weapons. We didn't even think of that yet. You people are out of your minds. We have to keep an eye on you. We need to be here, like, for God's sake. And then we were like, that's cool. So we just nuked this other country. We're going to go take all of the most terrifying scientists from Germany, this other country that we're fighting with, and they're going to help us go to the moon. And then the worst guy out of all of them, Wernher von Braun, who was notorious for using Jewish slave labor in his rocket factory, which again sounds like an Indiana Jones movie, but it really happened. And he would hang the 5 slowest employees once a week as a lesson to everyone else. And we said, cool, will you make a short film with Walt Disney where you explain both of your theoretical idea for a floating space wheel that all of humanity will live in while you wear double-breasted suits and chain smoke like you're Don Draper. And like we're all going to watch it as kids in Technicolor. And then like... You know, the entire, like, that happened.
I bet
right?
the ones that didn't get hung probably had good health benefits and stuff, though.
Not being hung is great for your health, as far as I know. And I mean, you know, it's like, I only bring that up, like us, like, you know, nuking Japan with a space weapon, like, after we'd already beaten them, and then hiring... the bad guys from Raiders of the Lost Ark, the one villain left that we have for sure. Like, there's always like a little bit of like, we're like the people who are trying to create communism in Cuba. It's like, well, maybe it would have worked, but the U.S. interfered. It's like there's just gray areas.
I wonder if.
But I'll go right ahead.
I was just gonna say, I wonder if like. In a perfect world to them, like if Bezos or Elon Musk or those guys just like, not for the same ethnic cleansing reasons, but just if they...
I love where this is going.
If they would love the idea of just like, yeah, just the 5 most inefficient Amazon drivers today.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying, because like a lot of...
They're already making them basically like pee in bottles, and that should only generally be reserved for scumbags like us on tour.
Elon Musk is like he was describing something that's like a bunch of like 15-year-old libertarians, the smartest people in the world, were like praising, where he was essentially talking about making company towns. And the likes of which Tennessee Ernie Ford sang about, I was like, I rode 16 tons, and what are you getting? And they were like, that's a good idea. Like, God damn. How does it feel to be a tool of your own oppression? It has to be so embarrassing, but maybe not. But anyway, the reality that we live in, the reality where like Chernobyl happened, right? Where like, how does an RKM, and you've watched that, right?
I've not seen Chernobyl. I've heard it's incredible.
Okay, so like, I'll forgive you for Always Sunny.
You know what though?
But you need to watch Chernobyl.
Here's the thing. Actually, I started to watch Chernobyl at work.
No.
And I couldn't do that because it was too much in Russian with subtitles, and I couldn't follow it. And I was like, I have to stop and watch this correctly, and I just never.
I will praise you for that decision.
That
you should sit and okay. Look. We should hang out more because we're friends. One of the things we're going to do, I figured out the first Always Sunny episode to show you, because there's like 16 seasons.
Yeah.
I think I know the one that'll hook you for life. I'm going to keep that a secret. We'll do that later.
Okay.
But like, we should maybe sit and watch Chernobyl together. Like, that is like, because that's just, I can't go on enough about it. But I mean, the acting... Literally, there's like 5 episodes, and the last one was the one where I was sure it would fall off. Because, okay, well, this is just the courtroom about what all happened.
Yeah.
And it's like a Russian show trial, and you know me, I love that kind of shit. But I mean, I'm like, it's probably going to be a little dry. And it was one of the most riveting, I was like, the other episodes dealt with the actual like radiation poisoning and explosions, and I'm like, okay, well, like, is this going to hold up? And it's almost the best part. And I'm like, wow. And Jared Harris, who plays a character I really like on Mad Men, and he's been in a lot. He was King George in the early seasons of The Crown, and the ones that, like, I quit. When it was the second Churchill died, I stopped watching The Crown. I'm like, I don't care anymore. John Lithgow is Winston Churchill.
I heard that was good, though, too.
Oh, at the very least, the parts with Lithgow as Churchill are, like, transcendent. It's incredible. Like, there's a scene where... He's in like naked in a bathtub, but like at like a parliament building or whatever, and he gets like a new secretary or somebody, whoever has to come, and she's like, "Hello, we're gonna do your." He's like, "I imagine that you have been told that I am a monster," and she's like, "Well, people have said," you should be polite and British, like, "people have said that you can be maybe occasionally, sometimes difficult to work with." Well, the truth is that I am a monster. But the problem there is that you must become a monster if you're going to defeat Hitler. Which I did. So read your things and I shall be taking mental notes. And then he just falls asleep in the tub while she reads the thing through the door to nobody, while he's drinking and wearing a top hat and nothing else in the bath at work. Which is what I would hope for all of us. Good Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. But Chernobyl is... perhaps like that last episode where they really get into what happened. It was like a Russian show trial, and the people that were directly involved didn't even care what happened, because one of the guys, Jared Harris, was the scientist behind it, and he was telling some of the other guys that eventually kind of come around to being on his side, because they're like, well, who are you? And he's like, I'm hope for fixing this and whatever. But he's like, we have about 5 years left from how close we were to this thing. There are some amazing scenes in that where he's like, they're in a helicopter, and like the government guy's like, fly over the smokestack, we want to see it. And he's like, no! He's like, fly over the smokestack or I will shoot you, because it's Russia in the 80s.
Yep.
And like, Jared Harris just like grabs a guy's arm, he's like, if you fly us over that smokestack in 20 minutes, you'll be begging for that bullet. And it's like so intensely dramatic. But at the end, they're like, how... Like, he explained scientifically how it all went wrong and all this stuff, but he was like, ultimately, though, how does an RBMK reactor overheat and explode? Because the parts we used were cheaper. And it was just such a, like, fucking... And that really happened. Like, that was what the graphite tips on the things, whatever. It's not really ruining anything. It's this whole... It happened in real life, but, like, that whole thing is our world. And that whole thing where we're like, the worst bad guys in the history of any kind of thing that we know about. The Nazis. We just hired their scientists. And again, as we mentioned, one of the worst ones. And he's sitting there smoking and drinking with Walt Disney on Sunday night, explaining this weird fucking spaceship they're going to build together. And we're like, yeah, that's just cool. Like, who gives a shit? And like, and then when you're like, well, and also we may have recovered some alien gravity. Well, that's just nonsense. Like, are you sure? Are you sure that that's just baloney? Like, even when, we've figured out that it's like, there's a very good chance that, native peoples migratory that, came over the Bering Strait from Asia had interactions with like the Gigantopithecus, this like 11-foot tall ape. Notoriously, they're famous for their oral histories. Notoriously, a lot of people in the Americas probably came from there and brought that with them. And they famously are like, they disregard time in their oral histories because it's a survival thing. Like, you don't go, well, we haven't seen that thing in the Black Night of the Woods that takes away our children in a while, so now we're going to stop talking about it. Like, no. You just assume that that's still there. You keep all that shit. Yeah. So it's like, we've almost traced to a T that there was a thing like that people interacted with, and they just hung on to the stories, and when they told it to white settlers, they didn't go, oh, by the way, this was like 5,000 years ago. They were like, they don't do that. So they're just like, yeah, this is a thing. And everyone's like, what? And it's very realistically possible. That's the world we fucking live in. And the idea that the whole alien thing has been so prevalent, so absolutely like made fun of in the way that if I was in charge, I would do it the same way. If I was I would be like, boys, we can't keep it a secret, but maybe if we make everyone that talks about it look like a loon, like that might work because everyone loves pointing a finger. Like, everyone loves making fun of the dum-dum that believes in spacemen.
Kind of like how in 2023 a whistleblower comes out and they put pictures behind him that look like DMT fractals.
Listen, the One India Network is a fine news source, but they just get a little excited here and again.
I mean, we were all excited.
Yeah, I don't blame them for that. I think them going, here's a clip from my son playing a Halo. You get the idea.
Yeah.
And besides, India is one of my, entertainment-wise, the entertainment industry-wise, one of my favorite places because their disregard like, our action movies always border on realistic. They always try to go like, well, the Terminator can't bring weapons back because the way the time travel thing works, like, he has to be covered in skin so that it's like putting metal in the microwave. You're like, oh, okay, whatever. Over there, they're like, this regular guy just did a cartwheel and punched a semi and it flew out of the atmosphere because he knows karate. Like, that's like, the way that they look at things, I applaud, because you don't want to get all boxed up and like, well, how does that make any sense? And they're like, oh, I mean, I bet I could punch that semi. It's like, good. Like, we paid fucking $19 to go to a movie. I wanted their version of Arnold Schwarzenegger needs to sing, he needs to dance, and he needs to be able to like fight Optimus Prime in a bare knuckle boxing match and maybe win, even though he's just a regular guy, because it gives you hope. Like, it's like, I'm not going to begrudge an entire, relatively, there's a lot of different microcultures within India or whatever, but like the main sort of, the Bollywood and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Their version of reality is the most fun version of reality. I am behind. So that news clip is basically just, it's like, that's
good for them.
That's their deal.
Because this one sucks.
Yeah, I hate this here. Like, I hate the idea that somebody goes like, oh, well, if the Little Mermaid was real, and it's like, I'm going to stop you right there. This conversation is not going to be fun for me, is it? Like, I'm never going to go see that movie, and neither are you, and you are wasting my time. Like, you're like, well, again, I can smell the propaganda on your breath. You're going to talk about how mer people probably couldn't sing underwater, and eventually it's going to be about how trans people shouldn't exist. And I'm like, I don't want to hear this from you. Okay? Like, if you have a reasonable theory about how Bigfoot is somehow connected to the Bermuda Triangle, I am very excited to hear whatever that is. Yeah. But whenever it just veers off into like, well, actually, I'm like,
it's like the Bud Light thing where somebody had to tell you to be mad about this thing that you're mad about.
And that bit killed. You'll be proud to know. That was one of our, when I was telling you earlier, one of our conversations I used on stage.
Oh, yeah.
And it's slaughtered. Because I was just like, like I just described, like what if they had run it on the Super Bowl, and it's like, oh, it was about not going halfway. It was like, like what, if you're gonna have to have Fox News tell you that somewhere on TikTok that you don't know how to use, there was a trans person saying drink Bud Light, and that just gets you all upset. Well, maybe next year during the Super Bowl, there should be 2 300-pound gender nonconforming individuals. It doesn't matter who's who, and at that weight, you can't tell.
I like it already. Go on.
All you can really see from your vantage point is that the only thing they shave is their heads. And they are in a violently aggressive ass-eating 69. And there is no voiceover. There's no music. There's just some dickhead like me with a microphone up. All you can hear is... oh, I'm sorry. No, I like it. And... that just goes on for 30 seconds, for 25 seconds in, just text appears at the bottom of the screen, and all it said is, you should have kept your fucking mouth shut. You bitched about a commercial you didn't even have to watch. You, in 2006, caught a glimpse of Janet Jackson's beautiful brown boobie, and you pooped your Pampers, and you were like, how am I going to explain this to my kids? Well, now 20 years later...
fucking words.
Well, you're after this new commercial, you're about to have a nice long Q&A session with the grandkids. and that's, I mangled it a little bit, but that actually did pretty well for never even having tried it before. And it actually got quite the reaction. By the way, also, I don't remember if I told you that, and we're going to start wrapping this up, but when I first told that joke was when I not accidentally, but it's like I won the lottery. The place that I was doing stand-up in, it's whoever shows up. But that night, it was a black room. There was just a lot of other black comics, and they brought their friends. That happens. There might be 2 people there might be 100 people there. Maybe they're there because their friends there. You don't know. It's just random. It's completely random. And we don't have those like set up or for real in Minnesota, and we should, by the way. Somebody needs to do that. That would be great. The way there is in New York and stuff. It's like, oh, this one's in Harlem and this is da-da-da. But like every once in a while, you just roll those dice, and that happens. And look, heroin can't get you that high. Like to be like there's like black dudes in suits here. And I was just up there, just farting in the mouth. They're like, Jesus, just like doubled over, crying, laughing. And I'm like, this is probably the best day of my whole life. Like, you cannot beat this for like excitement. And it encouraged me to get even worse when I talked about like role playing To Catch a Predator with my much younger wife and all that. They were just like, oh my God, God. That wouldn't have worked any other night, but boy, did it work then. And I don't know. Sorry, that has nothing to do with aliens. That was just a thing that happened a while ago, and I can't stop talking about it because I don't think it's recreatable or whatever. So I'm just, it's like Al Bundy getting the winning touchdown in high school. I'm like, I'm going to talk about this until I'm in a retirement home.
Yep.
And you know what?
Well, if we're a bad influence, that'll end up translating to aliens too. There'll be alien pedophiles. There'll be alien predators.
Yeah. There'll be aliens stand up like, yeah, like even showing them like stand up comedy and then going, by the way, depending on it's like you guys may not know this as aliens, but we do this thing where we go up, like people will pay money to gather into a room to watch one of us say things that aren't true and also maybe are upsetting because it makes us laugh and we want to watch that. And they're like, that's crazy. And I'm like, you know how like we come in different colors and stuff? And occasionally we've gotten into giant wars and fights over that. And they're like, yeah, that's pretty fucked up, but go ahead. Okay, sometimes when a certain group of them are together in a room, you can say things you couldn't normally say in front of the other ones. And it's really fun. Like, do you have to look like them? Like, No. It's just all what you say. It's just kind of like, I'm going to be extra gross tonight, and everyone's going to give me a medal for that. And they're going to be like, we don't understand you.
That sounds like all 16 years in Blue Felix. Just us getting fucking rewarded for being the grossest people imaginable.
They're just going to go
fun.
like
Man,
that.
That was fun.
They're going to be like, we don't fully understand this, but here's the thing. That cocaine stuff you just recently showed us, can we do more of that? Like, that'll be our legacy in the universe.
Yep.
Anyway, this one's going a bit long. I do have to read, especially because you're here. Okay, Dear Asshole Hotel, we already did that. Holiday decorations. I've been dog-earing him, but I kind of like to throw the book.
Well,
Contagious Shoe Department. Okay. Okay, so this book is called Dear Asshole. It came out in 2011. Never should have been made. Whoever made it isn't funny. It feels like it was written by AI, but it says that it came out in 2011. So it couldn't have been. Unless, it fell through an alien time wormhole. Probably.
yeah.
But it's this rotten book where all you do is, if you have some Karen ass problem with somebody, it's a bunch of tear out pages where it's like if you can't even write your own passive aggressive note, they're in this book for you, which is stupid. And also some of it is like, dear asshole who sprayed diarrhea all over the bathroom. It's just kind of like, where do you put that note? Just in the bathroom? They might not be coming back. Maybe that's why they chose that bathroom to hose down. Like, I don't know. And also it's very milquetoast. It's not like dear asshole that, wiped his butt and then used that poopy piece of toilet paper to draw a swastika on the fucking, bathroom door out of shit. It's like, well, of course they deserve a dressing down. Don't do that. In polite society, that has no place. But they instead choose to focus on things like dear asshole house guest who overstayed your welcome. What a middle-aged Vermont white lady-ass problem to fucking actually have issue with. And you're really going to leave them this note. So, here's this page.
I think last time we did this, I hated it as quickly as I did just now. Sorry.
No. Every page is, it's like the Hellraiser box. It's like a new puzzle configuration into a 4-dimensional nightmare that you could never have heretofore perceived, that only someone like a Cenobite could find joy in, because they like to have metal shivs stabbed through their genitals and stuff. So it's like, that's what this is.
Or a middle-aged suburban white woman.
And is there a difference between them and Cenobites? I don't think there is.
I assume that's where Clive Barker got the...
Yeah. Which is why some of them are clearly so fat. So here's the...
Jesus.
Well, if you were hot, Leo would be fucking you instead of a 20-year-old. What do you want? So, you said you just needed a place to crash while you got back on your feet. Okay, already, this isn't house guest. This is someone coming to you for help. The hand I hold this book with surely has bone cancer by now. Like, it is a cursed thing. Exactly how much longer is that going to take? Because you're driving me crazy. My couch has a permanent impression of your ass in it. And you've single-handedly ruined my love life. I don't know if you needed help with that.
I was just thinking of the ass prints in the couch because I've been fucking your wife the whole time.
Yeah. It's like, how come the ceiling smells like my wife's pussy? What's going on? Yeah. Okay, I've been this person. So here's the thing. You ruined my love life. You've been here so long, my mailman thinks we're fucking. Wow. That's a little bit less vanilla than the average very unfunny joke in here. It's not funny at all. But I kind of just, at least, you know what? Swing for the fences. You've been here so long, my mailman thinks we're fucking. You don't, okay. The kind of elitist bitch that wrote this shit does not talk to their mailman. You're exactly right. That is exactly the truth.
Yep.
If you're not going to pay me rent or pick up after yourself, at least have the decency to close the door when you're in the bathroom.
Every line, I'm actually starting to like this uninvited house guest a little bit more.
Listen, if this
You know
was
what I mean? It's like, if this is the type of person, it's like, I'm actually glad that you poop with the door open.
Yeah.
Like, just because it's like...
Well, but for the grace of God go I. Like, if I was, like, crashing on someone's couch and someone's like, excuse me, like, I know that you're unemployed and the world's on fire, but it's like, when are you going to, like, start paying me money? And I'd be like, okay, so, like, I'm going to start pooping in the tank part of the toilet with the door open, like, while I look at you. Like, yeah, that'd be my solution. And so, like, whoever this is, I'm kind of in love with now. If this is about you and you watch this podcast, let's hang out. We could poop with the door open together. There's room in my house. It's just me and my wife. I could have gone to my grave without seeing you wipe your ass last week. If you've never watched anyone who isn't you, who isn't one of your own children, or perhaps a bit of a dementia-touched grandparent wipe their ass, have you lived? Like, if you live, these people sound very middle-aged, which is about my age.
Yeah.
If I had made it to 42 years old without watching someone else wipe their butt, I would question if I'd really been out there experiencing life enough, again, like you mentioned, the Blue Felix ride for both of us was very much a lot of fun. That it wouldn't, it's like, it's fine that it's done, it's run its course, but wouldn't trade the history of it for anything. Like, it definitely needed to happen. And because without it, would we have played South by Southwest and had to pull over while our bus driver went and took a shit behind a dumpster in Austin, Texas, where there was like other people around that could definitely see him. And he described it as like pointing a shotgun full of pudding directly at the ground. And there was so much of it that he had to walk with his pants around his ankles to avoid the blob catching up with him. Whatever, like, that situation is the kind of situation you give into when that happens. Like, is that the goal? Do you want to watch a bus driver that's a meth head shit himself in a dumpster in Texas? No, that's not the point. But like, if you're adverse to seeing that kind of thing, you're never going to see all the good things.
Yeah.
You're never going to get your dick sucked by 3 girls at once who you've never met before just because you're in a band that 20 people showed up to see. Like, that comes with the shotgun pudding shit fucking dumpster adventure. Like, that's just thing, life.
Man. People think that comes from, like, you being in a cool rock band, and it's like, actually the pathway to that is shitting in a 5-gallon bucket.
Yeah.
It's like, that's
the pathway to that is putting a toilet seat on a 5-gallon bucket, claiming that it's a bathroom and lying to the DMV so you can get your fucking school bus zoned as an RV so people who would normally need a different license to drive it can just drive it without one, possibly while drunk. That's... yeah. Like, again, like, that's our Operation Paperclip. If you want to get to the moon, you got to bend the rules a little. Like, that's just the fucking way it works.
Yep.
Anyway. P.S. Now you're messing with my Netflix queue. Wow. Queue! This is when they... But this came out in 2011. This is when they mailed the DVDs to your house. Because you don't have a queue now. Do you have a Netflix queue? Like a line of stuff? No. You just pick what you want to watch.
Yeah.
You used to select...
Yep.
What weird ass DVD you wanted mailed to your fucking house or apartment in Uptown or wherever. So this is proof. This is from back then.
So wait a minute. Read that last line again.
P.S. Now you're messing with my Netflix queue, ? That's the last straw. P.P.S. The Horse Whisperer? Really?
That was the last straw. The fucking... You literally fucking want to make eye contact with me while you take a shit, but you fucking up my Netflix queue was just like, I couldn't take it anymore.
It's like, I am going to have to wait until you get done with The Horse Whisperer to watch... God, I don't even know.
You freeloading for months and not paying rent and like pooping
Just
with the door open is...
Fuck this book.
Fucking, that wasn't enough, but just... My God, like you fucking with my Netflix.
But I wanted to watch Step Up 2 or like whatever, or some like
see one of the 47 Adam Sandler movies on there that nobody's heard of.
I needed to see some inner city kids learn that life is worth living through the power of dance. And instead we're talking to a horse. But we're running a little bit long here, but I will definitely say that, like,
it was fun.
It was very much fun. And again, I said this before the podcast started, and it had everything to do with all the other stuff we said before the podcast started. On your 50th birthday, when I'm like 68 or whatever, you're younger than me. I don't know. I don't keep track.
I'll be 40 this year.
You okay? All right.
It's coming. Yep.
So 1 decade after this year, we'll get back together and we will have a podcast where we go, what if it didn't matter if all of our friends hated us? And we just named and told stories. And, like, because believe me, like, by the time, again, you're 50, I'll be like 52 or 3. And mid-50s John is going to be very unconcerned with the opinions of others. Fucking 22-year-old John that was desperate to get laid was shockingly nonchalant about his public image. Yeah. Pour a few decades of a little bit of Wild Turkey 101 Private Reserve onto that, and a whole lot of failure and sadness, and you have a recipe for the best podcast ever recorded.
The Reverend John Wheeler podcast takes zero responsibility for the words, actions, or ideas of its host, guests, or listeners. Though the people on the screen may at times be speaking directly to you, and may occasionally give you direct calls to action, neither Reverend John nor the Alchemical Cocktail Lounge are under any moral or legal obligation to answer for the potentially disastrous repercussions that may arise if you are stupid enough to actually follow the orders of a raving lunatic. Think for yourself and do whatever you want, because you're on your own. If anyone ever tries to sue this podcast, black SUVs will converge on your location in the darkness of night and you will never be seen again. Remember to like and subscribe.